Hi everyone, I'm so glad to be back in class with you. I hope that you all had a very nice break. We are going to start jumping into the rest of the history of the church before we start diving into certain topics like the Ten Commandments, the Beatitudes, the sacraments. I want to finish off the history portion. We have done some of it already as we talked about the ecumenical councils, the martyrs, the saints, but I want to condense all of it down from whatever we have in the book into a lesson so that we can go through the whole history from your book in one session. So you guys should have a packet from Packet Pickup called The History of the Catholic Church. You will need that in front of you as we go through this PowerPoint. You guys will be filling in the blanks in your packet so that you guys have some notes on the history of the Catholic Church. In the back of your book, we have this church history timeline. There's also a world timeline of like what's going on in the world during this time, but I wanted to emphasize the church history aspect of this. So before we went on break, you guys were supposed to have watched the nativity story. So putting that into perspective of time, Jesus was born around 4 AD. During this time, Rome was taking over governance of Jerusalem. So you guys saw how the Romans were very much in charge during that time. They were constantly criticizing and bashing the Jews for being who they were. And during this time, the Sadducees and the Pharisees are very active. And we'll learn more about the Sadducees and the Pharisees soon in one of our lessons. Then throughout the years 30 to 33, this was around the time when Jesus' ministry took place. And eventually it culminated or finished with his crucifixion, death, and resurrection. After that, from the year 33 to 125, we have that Jesus is proclaimed. Paul, who traveled to Athens during that time. We also have the Council of Jerusalem, which we talked about before in this class. The Romans conquered Jerusalem and they destroyed the temple. And that was a very, very devastating blow to the Jewish people. And during this time, the New Testament of the Bible was being written. From the years 125 to 325, the church spread throughout the Roman Empire. The church affirms that the God of the Old Testament is the Father of Jesus. Continuing on, we start getting into the ecumenical councils that we've talked about of Nicaea, Ephesus, and Chalcedon. We have that monasticism spreads. The Basilica of St. Peter is erected in Rome, and it's replaced by present-day church in the 1500s. Then in between the years 1000 and 1300, we have the schism with the Eastern Church, and we'll talk about that later on in this lesson so you know what that means. The church becomes a predominant spiritual force in the West, and the truce of God was established during this time. Continuing on from 1500 to 1700, we have that the Protestant Reformation begins, and we're going to learn about the major characters during that time. And between the years 1700 and 2000, we have the Declaration of the Immaculate Conception, meaning Mary was born clean of sin. Pope Leo XIII issued the encyclical Rerum Novarum, and we'll learn about that in a little bit. We also have the councils of Vatican I and Vatican II, which were very important to the development of the church in terms of how we see it today. We have Catholics being martyred in Central America, and that was in between the years 1970 and 1980. So we're still having martyrs in our present-day church even. Pope John Paul II meets with the representatives of major world religions in the years 1986 and 2002. So a lot of this is going to sound a little familiar to you because we did talk about some of these things. I want to do a rehash of what our history is so far that we have. Based on the ecumenical councils we've covered already. So this might sound a little bit familiar. So the church begins In the days after Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead, the disciples remained uncertain and afraid. They were fearful of those who had killed Jesus, that they would try to kill them as well. So they actually went into hiding, and they were in this upper room where the Holy Spirit visited them at Pentecost, which was the first confirmation. They were filled with the strength and the courage to preach the gospel to Jews and Gentiles alike. So we have the Jewish people who were God's chosen people, but we also have the Gentiles, and the Gentiles were considered atheists at that time because they didn't really follow the customs of the Jewish faith, of course, that they didn't believe in their God. So at this point, they were trying to decide, okay, so do we try to evangelize to these people? Do we try to convert them to this new Christian faith that we have? And the answer was yes. We needed to welcome them into the fold and have everybody welcomed into the church. Continuing on, we have the persecution of the Christian church. So beginning with Nero's persecution of the Christian church in Rome and lasting through the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity, Christians lived under close scrutiny. While the periods of intense persecution were few, Christians were outsiders and considered atheists because they didn't celebrate the festivals of the local gods. This discrimination caused the conditions that led to the first Christian martyrs. You should have this paper somewhere in your folder or in your book called the Ecumenical Councils. I asked you guys to glue it into the back cover of your book, but if you haven't done so, we are going to be finishing off this paper and filling it in. So far, we have talked about the councils of Jerusalem, Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, Chalcedon, and we're going to continue on learning about Lateran IV, the Council of Trent, and the councils of Vatican I and Vatican II. Make sure you have this in front of you so we can finish filling it in. So in 313, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity. Up until this point, it was illegal to be a Christian. As more people joined the church, disagreements arose about the church's answer to the question, who is Jesus? This seems to be a central question of our year as we kind of try to figure out for ourselves who Jesus really is to us. So, this question of who is Jesus led to several councils that helped create our catechism, establishing teachings about our faith. Now, I wanted to show you guys what the Catechism of the Catholic Church actually is. It's a book. It has all of our teachings inside of it. So, when people say, oh, yeah, I'm going to catechism, not quite. We say that we're going to faith formation. We can't really go into a book. I mean, we can read a book, we can learn things from a book, but we don't go to a book. We go to faith formation. So this right here is the proper term of what the catechism actually is. So these are the councils that we have filled in so far. We have the Council of Jerusalem, which was in the year 49 AD. In this council, we have the Gentiles do not need to become Jewish first in order to become Christians. At the Council of Nicaea in the year 325 AD, we established that Jesus is consubstantial. He's of the same being. He's made up of the same stuff as his Father, and they are equal in every way. At the Council of Constantinople in 381 AD, we established that Jesus is fully human, just like us in every way, except for sin. Jesus was completely sinless while he was here on earth. At the Council of Ephesus in the year 431 AD, we established that Mary became the mother of God by the human conception of the Son of God in her womb. The bishops affirmed that she can be called the mother of Jesus and the mother of God. At the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, we established that Jesus is fully God and he's fully man. He's not 50% one and 50% the other. It's not a demigod. Jesus is God. He's fully God and he's fully man, 100% of each.